I'm Jen Milam, and I'm VP of Sales at Abel. I'm happy to be moderating this conversation. We have some absolutely wonderful women here that I would love to have go around and introduce themselves to kick us off before we get into the nitty-gritty of the conversation. So, Ayana, could you go ahead and start us off?
Yeah, hi, my name is Ayana Ishmael. I'm the editorial assistant at Teen Vogue. I'm also a recent graduate of Florida A&M University, which is a historically Black university in Tallahassee, Florida. And yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Hi, I'm Marielle Elizabeth. I use she, her pronouns, and I have been working in ethical and sustainable fashion for the better part of a decade. My interest as an influencer, writer, and photographer is and has always been, how do we get more plus size people inspired, involved, and feeling included in ethical fashion? And I pursue this both by working as an influencer, but also working with brands doing consulting, fit testing, and helping them extend their size range.
I'm Whitney Reynolds. I am the design and fashion director at Abel. I led the team into our journey towards inclusive sizing over the last 18 months.
Wonderful. Thank you, ladies, so much for being here. I'm very excited for this conversation. Whitney and I work at Abel together, and as she said, we've been really focused on this over the last 18 months. So Abel actually started out as a social mission-based business. We really started with our focus on the impact to workers around the globe. And then as we've grown, we really have incorporated a sustainable element as well, realizing that being responsible to the environment ties in with being responsible to the people living in that environment. And just again, over the last 2 years have really added this third element of responsibility to the customer as well. And so not only to the worker, to the environment, but also to the customer. And that was one of the main drivers that led us into extending our sizing in our apparel. So I'm excited to get to speak with you all about it. Well, Whitney, I think we'll start off with you, if that's okay, and then we'll kind of work our way through some questions. So I'd love for you to tell us, what does inclusive sizing mean to Abel?
I think, it's one of the things that as we look back on when we first started doing apparel, it's kind of like, duh, we should have done it from the beginning. But I do feel that it is, if we're really going to empower women, and if we're really going to make women be their most genuine selves, like we have to clothe all women. And it's like one of the foundational parts of what our business is today, where it's going. And I think we can't do that without actually being able to outfit all women in all sizes.
Wonderful. And as you said, there's so many women that fall into this category. Actually, more than half of American women are considered, quote, plus size. So why do you think, as a design director, why aren't there more sustainable fashion brands making clothes in those sizes? And why does it seem easier for brands to talk about things like impact and sustainability versus actually doing the work of clothing plus size women?
Oh, that's like a loaded question. But I think, I don't want to speak for other brands. I will speak from my experience and what, I think designers are afraid to ask hard questions. And I think they're afraid, they don't know where to start. And it can seem really overwhelming. And I've been in the industry a really long time, about 13 years. And I will say the representation of designers who are plus size is there are not many. And it's hard to design for a product for a group of people if you don't yourself identify with them. And it's real easy to kind of just forget or not be aware. And I think it just goes into, you're going to design kind of in some way of yourself. And if you're not in that group, it's real easy to just not go there. And I think sustainability seems easier and it's more trendy at the moment to talk about, oh, this is good for the environment. And it's an easier kind of thing to find organic cotton than it is to clothe a plus size woman, or it seems that way.
There's a number of reasons from what I've heard with working with different designers why it seems like there's such a barrier. First of all, creating plus sizing isn't just about grading up from the existing size range you have. It's about completely creating new grading rules, completely creating a new fit at that kind of 1x, 2x point, and then grading up from there. Bodies don't perfectly grow in like a mathematical sense. So you can't just keep mathematically grading beyond a size 8, which is usually where brands kind of begin their grading rules, as they start at a size 8 and they go down and they go up. And after about, 8 standards of deviation in either direction, it's really hard to keep building upon that without the proportions no longer matching the way the human body changes and expands. So I'd say that is a big reason. And then I also think it's understanding that this is a systemic problem, in the sense of fashion schools aren't teaching plus size grading. Most people that work in plus sizing never come across a plus size fit model or a plus size fit like dress form unless they're actively seeking one out. So we have designers graduating from very prestigious fashion schools that have never designed or graded for a plus size body. And so I think that adds to the level of apprehension a lot of brands feel. And so since it is such a financial investment, and then you have design staff that don't necessarily feel comfortable or confident, especially if they aren't already plus size, it's often just easier to avoid it, despite the fact, yes, as you mentioned, the majority of people in North America are plus size.
Yeah, I'll add, I agree with all of that. I think the biggest thing that I notice is what I'm talking to other designers and friends for stories, especially. A lot of designers even say like they never were taught that originally, but then also I think it goes down to like they don't want to do the work. And so I spoke to a designer, her name is Anifa. She's the owner of Hanifa. And she was just saying, she was like, I think it's just goes down to like some designers choose, they don't want to take the time to learn how they can make their exact designs in a larger size. They don't want to work into the craftsmanship that it takes to make a plus size item in the way that they have it in a standard size. And so I think it goes down to you not valuing it and not having any kind of importance, and like not putting it, like kind of putting clothes on like the back burner as like a second rate option, when it really shouldn't be, because like we said, like more than half of Americans, they're wearing a size 10, 12 and up. So it's honestly unfortunate.
I think that anti-fat bias plays a huge role in the assumption of it's not worth the trouble. I think that for a very long time, plus size individuals were viewed as people in temporary bodies, people that were unwilling to spend money on clothing, that weren't interested in fashion because that was so much of the narratives that we were taught growing up and that we heard reflected back to us. So I do think there's also this either unconscious or very conscious bias that fat people don't want to spend money on clothing, which is, in my opinion, incredibly untrue, but again, rooted in that anti-fat bias that fat bodies are temporary. And if we really, loved our bodies, why wouldn't we be pursuing thinness? Why wouldn't we be trying to fit into straight sizing? And so I also have very much so heard a lot of that rhetoric for the last 5 years. Thankfully, I think there's been a lot of pushback from the plus size community on that, but I do think it still factors into decisions, especially from a business perspective.
It's a hard thing to hear out loud too, but I think speaking it out loud is one of the first ways that we can change the industry too. And so I appreciate y'all speaking into that. I also thought, Marielle, it's like so helpful to hear that the anti-fat bias also views a fat body as temporary. Like that's so helpful to like put words to and name, like, okay, yes, that is part of it. And how do we flip that on its head? How do we change that? This is actually a great segue. Sizing. I want to talk about sizing because sizing is so erratic in the fashion industry. A size 8 can be, I personally range, I think, across 4 different sizes, depending on what brand I'm buying from and what part of my body I'm buying for in terms of tops versus bottoms, all that. Whitney, I know firsthand that you did so much work on your sizing and your grading chart. Can you talk a little bit about how, as you were developing the full sizing range of our line, how you thought about that?
It's obnoxious how confusing it is, and it shouldn't be. One thing we really tried to focus on is like, we looked at other brands, we had a focus group and we're like, where do you like to shop? What fits you well, And we looked at those brands and we were like, okay, here are the measurements and here where the measurements line up. And kind of took the sizing out for a second and looked at, here are the measurements. Here's where we start to see a shift. And looked at it that way versus fixating on you're this size, this size, this size. And I think in that it gave us a little bit of freedom to say this is what makes sense, but also trying to convey that to our customer of, you are more than just the size. This is who you are, and this is it. And try to make it as easy as possible because it is so incredibly confusing, especially as we go up in larger sizes, the breaks. And then it's more about the proportion, like Marielle mentioned before too.
I'd love to just hear from all of you. Why do we think that plus size is the quote last to be thought of? We talked a little bit about why we think sustainability often comes before extending sizes, but there's also the other options of petite or tall in terms of sizing extension. So what is y'all's thought on the trends you see in the industry in terms of when brands move into extended sizing versus move into petite versus tall?
I think the proportion from petite to regular or standard sizing is pretty similar. The ratios are about the same. They're just smaller or shorter and shorter inseams. And as you go up into extended and plus size, the proportions start to change, and they change in ways that aren't formulaic, and they don't make perfect sense. They just change, and it's harder. It is harder, and it takes a little bit more time and effort, and it's more nuanced versus this very like pragmatic approach. From my perspective as doing it.
I think from my perspective, it really touches on kind of, again, bias. I think it's so important that we keep calling it out and pointing it out. I don't think I've ever heard someone say, tall people don't want to wear this. Short people don't want to wear this. I've never heard someone be like, well, once you need tall length inseams, you no longer want to like show off your shoulders or whatever. Whereas I think that there's so much bias in what a plus size customer wants. And I think that like, if you think about the concept of like trend or why brands are more hesitant, I think often brands have this idea that they have to completely redesign everything that they're doing into just a specific plus size line, or they'll only take a risk on their more modest pieces into plus sizing. I mean, I can't tell you how many, ethical, sustainable designer collections I've looked at where like they'll release 1 or 2 garments up to a 3X, or the only garments they seem to release season after season are black, shapeless, very, garments that might be perfect for someone, but I think are very much so things that already exist. Whereas I see trendy, bright print, colorful things, fewer and fewer and fewer, the higher sizing gets. And I think that that's also a component that really showcases the way that we think about a plus size customer so differently than we would think about other sizing grading needs. That I think ultimately loops back to our perception of what a plus size person wants to wear, how they want to look, and how they want the world to see them.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think the only thing I would add is that I think in the beginning, like fashion, especially in regards for me personally, just being in high fashion and all that kind of stuff, it like fat bodies weren't on runways, fat bodies weren't in magazines, fat bodies didn't exist as what you wanted to be. Like when you would open a magazine, you'd see these women like owning New York City nightlife. They didn't have fat bodies doing that. And so it just like is ingrained in our mind that like when you're creating clothes, you're not thinking about plus sizes because you're not, like most designers, they're designing like their dream woman. Like most designers say that like they're creating their ideal person. And that's just like systemically put into us that like your ideal, your dream girl, your one that you want everyone to like be envious of, want to be with, that's not a fat body. And so I think a lot of designers and a lot of fashion, it's a second thought. No one's thinking about what a plus size body wants to wear, what they want to be seen in, because when you're picturing who you want to wear your designs, you're not picturing a plus size body, you're picturing a very thin sample size, even like down to like, even like race, and like all of that plays into it. I think it's like we're really giving like a certain vision of who we want to wear our clothes. So a lot of people, minorities included, plus size people included, were put on the back burner because you're not being seen as that dream person that you want in your clothes.
Yeah. What would you, what would any of you, especially Ayana, like I'm so interested in that train of thought. How do we change that? Like, what would you tell a brand to do to make sure that they're considering those things at every table that they're sitting at making decisions?
Yeah, I definitely think it just goes down to who you have in the room. I think for me, I think diversity is so important. And I say it all the time. I was like, in regard, even just looking at like race, like you can't just have like one like person that identifies like as LGBTQ, one Black person, one Asian person, because that doesn't even speak to like a really broad perspective of people. And so I think when you have a room full of people that all look the same, it's really easy to just like forget. And like, it's sometimes not even malicious. Like I've been in situations where I was like, I didn't even think of that, but there wasn't anyone that like was in the room with me that also was aware of like that could have been a problem. And so I think just really taking the time to have a diverse group and a diverse team, like people in your higher up executive situations as well, being very aware of like, okay, how can this work? Make sure you're thinking of everyone and like trying to find a perfect solution. I think it's hard and it takes time and it's not always going to be right the first time you try it. But I think just being like cognizant of like how you can like make progress, I think is the only way to move forward, and having people in the room that can speak up for those issues.
I'd also add on, Ayana, to what you're saying, giving collaboration opportunities with people with more diverse intersections than your own, because we know that especially Black and other people of color and fat people and disabled people are not given access to the same amount of resources as people that do fall into that cis white thin box. And so seeking out collaborations, giving those opportunities to people that come from more diverse perspectives to be able to create, to be able to build names for themselves and opportunities for themselves that can lead to other things. I think we need to be asking, why are the majority of fashion designers still this one body type? And what can we be doing to make sure that there is more diversity when we look at who is designing?
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit. My husband's a third grade teacher, and there's so many programs now to get women into STEM, into like all the math and science. And it's like, how do we do that with fashion design? How do we say like, hey, even though you, for whatever part of your identity feels like it's not stereotypical for this, you can and should pursue this. And I think that's a really interesting thing to think about. Whitney, I would love to direct one back to you. So as a design director who has extended sizing of the line over the last 18 months, what have you learned? What are you taking away from the process of extending your size range?
I've learned a lot. I mean, I could sit here for probably an hour just talking about all the technical things that I've learned just from talking with our fit models and just partners like Mariella have come in and like been so generous with feedback. And I mean, I could go on and on and on. I think one of the things, or a couple of things that I've really taken away is that, and I'm still working on it, is being okay with being wrong and being okay that I don't know everything. And that's the Enneagram 3 in me. I like to be right. I like to always know what I'm doing. But to really approach it from a place of humility and knowing, yeah, I am not this customer, and I will never ever be able to identify with a lot of the challenges she faces and our past shopping experiences, and just being open to that. And it's not perfect. Sometimes it's hard to hear feedback. It always is. But if you're going to succeed and you're going to do well in this and really do right by your customer, you have to be open to feedback and really listen and know that we're doing this all together to make all women feel confident and empowered. So being open there, and then also just, again, the technical things I've learned about proportions and just those little nuances, the challenges of that we try to fix. I think design is about problem solving, so with anything. And are we making straps wide enough to accommodate for a bra? Are we making sure that waist seams are flattering on bodies? Are we making sure sleeves feel good and you feel beautiful wearing them? So I think it's just being okay hearing feedback, and really, and it sounds so simple, it does, but being in the industry for a long time, you get very focused on, this is how you do things, this is how you do. Yeah. And again, I didn't go to school, I did not learn how to drape on a plus size body, and it has been such a beautiful thing to learn and to be a part of. But yeah, I would say just being open.
Wonderful. And you've put together some of the resources that you've used, right, for other brands?
Yeah, we are actually going to be publishing our kind of like roadmap of like how we did it. It's not perfect. It's not, it's pretty honest, actually. It's pretty vulnerable. Like, hey, we screwed up here. Hey, we would have done this better. But yeah, it's to really help the other designers to not have an excuse anymore. You can do it too. My team there's 3 of us now, and before it was 1.5. So when we did this, so it's pretty, you can do it on a small team. So we're trying to help the industry here.
How do you think the media can better support the plus size community?
Definitely think it just goes down to like coverage and like honest and like real and like thoughtful coverage of the fashion plus size industry. I think it's really complicated. I know for even just myself, I do a lot of stories. Like I pitch a lot of stories where I'm like, hey, I'd love to do this from a plus size angle. I'd love to do this from focus on like larger sizes. And I think that's so important. So especially in regards to like traditional media places, especially like Condé Nast, which is a huge platform. Like I remember 2 years ago, actually, I was a junior in college, and my first freelance story I did for Teen Vogue was talking about the limited plus size clothing options for college age students in my college town, because we had one mall, it had like 3 stores, and the one store you could go to that was like, I don't want to say age appropriate, but when you're 20, you want to dress like the other 20-year-olds, like no matter what size you are. And so all we had was Forever 21. And then one day they got rid of their plus size section. And so it was like, all you could go to was Macy's. And it was like, there wasn't anything in Macy's that was like 20-year-olds going to the like local clubs and bars. And so I spoke to like about 12 different girls in that entire college town, and they all just said the same thing. They just wish they, could just go to the mall with their friends and find something cute to wear and like feel like the other girls. And I think that story, like, even though I was just doing it from a perspective of like, this was my personal experience as well. Once published, I had so many people reach out to me, like, thank you for writing this. Like, finally, someone said into words about like what I was dealing with. Like, no one understood why I didn't want to go to the last minute, like, theme party in my college town. Like, no one understood why I didn't show up to the interview because I didn't have an appropriate professional wear. Like, and I think no one really thinks about it. And so I think giving not only like myself, that's someone's on staff, but freelance writers the chance to talk about those issues. I think in media, we're slowly taking time to have like plus size stories be on the front lines and like covering all the different issues, but there's still like a ways to go, especially at like bigger, larger publications. But of course, there are really important publications that are doing the work, like the Curvy Fashionista. I think they're so important to the conversation, especially in media, because all they cover is plus size issues. And so I think it's so important and vital. But then it also goes into like other publications too, that we do the work, that we're making sure that we're having stories and like thoughtful conversations and trying to figure out how we can actually help and be of service to make change. Because even as simple as it was, when I published that first article for Teen Vogue when I was in college, the store director of H&M in Tallahassee reached out to me. She was like, hey, I saw your article and I want you to know, like, we're getting plus size clothes in the next 2 weeks. I just wanted to let you know if you want to come by. And I thought that was so cool, because it's like, cool. If I didn't write that story, that might have not happened. Yeah. But since she saw it and she was like, oh, wow, this is an issue that girls are having in my area where I have this store, like, let me see if I can change it. And like that little thing was so helpful.
That's awesome.
So one of the kind of key phrases that we've used in this conversation so far is size inclusive. And I want to talk about that term. What do we think of that term? What does that mean to you? And inevitably, is someone always going to be left out? And how do we speak about that as we're talking about inclusive fashion?
I'd love to answer that question. I think the term size inclusion has been kind of boiled down to a pretty broad description of anyone offering sizes above a size 16. And I think that if we use the word inclusive, it feels so final. It feels like if I'm size inclusive, I'm done. And I think that that for me is always a really problematic part of that phrasing, versus I know Abel made the choice to use more sizes or extended sizes, or our size range encompasses. To me, that means that there's more room for growth, that there is acknowledgement of who you are serving and also the counterpart of who you are not serving. I think that for me, something I would probably say is size inclusive is going up to a 10X or a size 40. And I think that there are very few brands. And I think that even at a 10X, there are still bodies that are not going to find clothing within that brand or within those sizes. I think that to say we offer custom sizing above is great, but it also requires a lot of knowledge on the customer to know how to properly measure, to know how to convey how their body carries how their body carries proportions and weight. Because again, if you think about plus size bodies, all of the proportions are so different from a plus size person to a plus size person. And so that is also, you know, another challenge. So I guess to me, the question is the advantage of using inclusive sizing that it's a simple, easy buzzword that means, especially straight size customers will look at it and feel good supporting your brand because they can be like, oh, I'm supporting an inclusive brand, when they actually have no idea what that means. Whereas is it kind of an easy term to say, we're done, we've done our work, there's no more work to be done? And I would challenge that and say, I mean, if inclusive is something that we're always working towards, we always have more things that we can do and more people that we can be considering. Because I think right now size inclusion is very much so focused on size, but again, it's very diminutive to people, to disabled people that would have different needs in terms of accessibility, in terms of, you know, buttons versus zippers versus Velcro. I think inclusivity has to extend to all the different needs all different people have in clothing. And so, yeah, I personally don't love the term. I understand the impulse for brands to use it, but I think that it's often used in a way to check out of a conversation versus engaging and pushing yourself further.
Yeah, almost like, well, we're size inclusive. Final curtain. No more conversation, you know? Yeah, I think that's a really good call out. Marielle, you hit on the next question a little bit earlier, and I just want to take it a little bit further. You know, as brands set out to extend their sizing, like, what do you want them to know? What do you think plus size customers are looking for? And what would the plus size community ask a brand to keep in mind as they're designing products?
I would say the most common piece of feedback I hear is we want the exact same thing you're offering in straight sizing, in the same size, like in the same range of color, in the same range of cut. Give me something that's a crop top. Give me tiny little mini skirts. Just make sure it's graded and fits properly and consistently on a plus size body. While I understand that it's really hard for brand to brand to brand to have sizing consistency, I personally have items in my closet from an extra large to a 5X, which is a like 6 size spread. I think that it's so important that at least within a brand, there is size continuity. So if I'm typically between a 2X and a 3X in Abel, I would say that that is something I can almost always be confident in ordering. I would say that's one of the biggest things. And then, yeah, fun clothing. Stop assuming you know what fat people want to wear because of your own bias or prejudice or the beliefs that you grew up with and very thinly veiled threats of like, if you want to wear a string bikini, you have to be a certain size. If you want to wear horizontal stripes, you have to be a certain size. Because I just think across the board, the plus size community is so sick of that. Give me neon clothing, give me tiny things, give me full body muumuus, give me exactly the amount of diversity that we get to see our straight size counterparts having, and then put it in stores so I can try it on. I want so desperately for there to be more accessibility of in-person shopping, because as a plus size person, I almost never have the opportunity to decide if I like something before I buy it. 95% of my clothing I have bought, waited 2 weeks at a minimum before I even get to try it on and decide if I want to keep it. And at that point, it's really difficult for me to be like, it doesn't fit exactly how I want, I'm going to send it back. Whereas I think when plus size people have the opportunity to shop in person, we get to be more discerning about what we're choosing to buy. And that leads to us making better purchases that actually serve us, that we look forward to wearing, and that get that, you know, kind of 30 wears, which is something I'm always working towards, in a way that shopping online doesn't have that option unless you're buying multiple sizes. And then we all know that cycle of returns. Like, it's just, it is so hard to move in a direction of confidently buying something that you're going to commit to and wear to and feels the way you want it to online. And I think that that is going to be one of the biggest kind of things I'm pushing for, and I hope to see change over the next few years as more and more brands do offer, you know, an extended size range or a size range that is broader than what they originally had. How can I try it on? How can I feel confident in what I'm choosing? How can I know if your proportions fit my proportions if I am constantly forced to shop online?
Yeah. I actually had that kind of question in my mind, Ayana, as you were talking about your experience with with the mall in college and trying things on. I wondered, how does online shopping becoming more and more popular, especially with the pandemic? I feel like everyone learned how to online shop during the pandemic. Like, how does that play into this? And so it's interesting to hear your perspective, Marielle, on that still not being a very satisfying experience. I have a question that is somewhat
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, please.
I think that the challenge is like online shopping for fast fashion is really easy. You're spending 20, 30, max $40 on a piece. There's less risk. I think when you are shopping, especially ethical and sustainably designed brands, the price point is like $150 and up. I think that that's a much higher financial gamble on a brand you've never tried, on fabric you've never felt, on things you're not sure are going to look the way you want them to. And I think that if we are, within an ethical fashion space, talking about sustainable fashion, we need to realize that that price point adds this extra pressure. And I think for a plus size customer, I mean, for all customers, but especially for a plus size customer, where we have a very learned and accurate distrust in online sizing charts and in the gamble of sizing, and especially small retailers, so many of them have very limited return policies because they have such limited stock. I understand it, but it's one barrier after another, and it makes perfect sense to me why the plus size community is so hesitant or afraid to keep trying. If they try once and it doesn't fit and it doesn't work out, they've wasted hundreds of dollars and that's it. Like, I think that we can't compare shopping for ethical and sustainable brands to, picking something off Zara and ordering it to your home in 24 hours, where it comes with a return label and it's the easiest thing to send back. Those are very different online shopping experiences. And I think we, as people within the sustainable fashion community, have to acknowledge those differences and start thinking about how we overcome some of those barriers.
Yeah, I'll add, I think also in regards to brands and sizing and online shopping, because I do an immense amount of that, I think it's so important also that the brands know that when they're choosing models, especially the plus size models, to continuously use the same type of plus size body, which me and my friends always laugh about, the hourglass, flat stomach, like perfect shape plus size model body. I get it because it's convenient. And again, it's also like, kind of a dreamy girl. That's what you want to look like if you are plus size. You want to still have a flat stomach. And I think that's not the case for a lot of plus size people. And even when talking to friends, they always ask me like, how did you find, because I'm online shopper, number one. I will find things that fit me perfectly, but I also take the time. I don't just like buy something. I'll go through the description. I'll read what it's made of. Is it like 95% cotton? Is it like 5% latex? Is it going to stretch? Okay, if it's going to stretch, or if it's leather, that means it's not going to move. So I need to size up. What are the measurements? I'm tall. So like I do a very extended reading of the small details on each item before I buy something. But not a lot of people are going to take the time to do that because they're like, I just want to get something. But then they buy it and they're like, this doesn't fit how it looked on this plus size model that was 5'9" and XYZ, but she was completely different body shape than you. And so it's like really hard. Like I never even look at the models that I'm buying clothes from, because I'm like, I don't look like Sabria Majors. I was like, that's not what I look like. I was like, I love her. I think she's amazing, but she has a perfect body in the sense of like what I would like to look like as a plus size person. And so I think it's like very hard to also buy clothes when the plus size models don't even look like you.
What services? So two questions. So one, this is a totally selfish question because we just implemented try before you buy at Abel, because to Marielle's point, I think it is so hard to say, okay, this $150 dress, I want to buy in 2 or 3 sizes so that I know I have it for the event I'm purchasing it for, first of your 30 wears, whatever it is. And I've been so pleasantly shocked by how many people are using that program, that try before you buy, because they get a full 7 days to try on before anything gets charged to their card, because it is such a commitment, whatever payment method you use, to have multiple sizes of something sitting on that statement for the entirety of some of these return processes take a long time, And so I think that's really valid. And that's just like data on our end that I would say validates that experience 100%.
Is that program exclusively in the US or is it international?
It is exclusively in the US, but we're working on Canada for you, Mario. Don't worry.
Great. Just for me, exclusive. The only Canadian in Canada that is wearing plus size fashion is thrilled to hear it. No, it's like it's this whole other layer of being Canadian, of just like there's more plus size fashion in the US and brands like that. So it's just like, and I get it. I hear it all the time from people in the UK. People in Australia are like dying for plus size clothing. And so I think that that's also like, you know, another, and another component of, there's a lot of brands that only offer plus sizing in the US, or their offerings in Canada are so much smaller, even if you are paying to order and things. Yeah, it's really interesting, just like how many layers of difficulty there are. Yeah. Sorry, I had to ask, because if I don't ask, someone else will ask.
Listen, always do. And this is like, we launched this, I think 7 weeks ago. And so it's like, we're so shocked by how many people are just hungry for this service. And so now it's like, okay, what else? And maybe Canada's the next thing. That's great. I love that. In that same vein, I'd love to hear y'all are such a wealth of knowledge on design and plus size fashion and slow fashion, all the things. What services do you want brands to know are available to help? So if there's a brand listening to this that says, okay, we're ready to make the leap, we want to extend our sizing, we want to do this responsibly and well, what would you point them to?
I think a really easy way to get customer feedback, I think, is really, really, really important to be able to keep honing fit. And I think incentivizing that for plus size customers so that you are compensating them in some way for their time. I think that if a plus size customer, especially when you're rolling out new sizing, is able to easily give you feedback as to why something didn't work, I think that's, you know, a very, very, very important opportunity and point of contact with a customer base that you need to be connecting with to learn from. And I think making sure, and Ayana, this touches on what you said, but making sure that all of your e-commerce, all of your, like, I've seen a few websites, I'm pretty sure Universal Standard has this, where you can literally see every garment in every size on a variety of different body types. Mm-hmm. I would say making sure that you have, if you're offering, you know, a 1X to a 5X, making sure each photo shoot for new collection launches has a different person within that size range, that you're not staying in that 1X, 2X size range. I want to see e-commerce shoots done entirely on the largest size you carry, because that would give me more confidence, even as a person that might not need that larger size, that you are confident in the grading and the grading rules you have. And I think that, you know, you can get away with improperly grading something at a 1X or a 2X, but by the time you hit a 4X or a 5X, it is very noticeable if it's not been fit properly. So really giving customers that confirmation that you are confident in your fit and your grading by showing it as the ideal, as you had said, Ayana, of like showing it on the body that you are so proud to see it on because you put in the work to make sure it looks good. I think that plus size customers aren't asking for a lot, really. If you boil it down, it's like, we want the same things as other sizes, we want it to fit when we buy it, and we want you to see that you like it on our bodies just as much as we're going to. I don't think that those are really that impossible of asks. And I think brands really need to start internalizing it and realizing that the plus size community isn't asking for the world. We're asking for the exact same treatment as everyone else they've been designing clothing for. And it's honestly embarrassing for all of us that we're still asking this late into the game.
Yeah, I would agree with everything. I don't think I would add anything except for just emphasizing that if there's brands that want to take the time, like get a small cohort of people. I think I personally love, even though people go back and forth, I love when there's like a group of influencers or people or that like are chosen to help out the brands and like try the products on, review them, make videos, show me what it looks like. I know she's a huge influencer, Remy Bader. Like, I love watching those videos. I'm just like laughing. I'm like, yeah, that's true. I was like, it doesn't fit. And it's like, it's okay. Some things from one brand might fit and some might not, but it's nice to see, okay, like this didn't work for her, but it might work for me. But I think taking the time to actually have a small community of people that can review your products, tell you how it fits, how it feels, and like what they like and don't like about it is so important, because then you can go back and take that information and actually like try to make a more universal change. And it's like sometimes that like is so helpful for me personally.
And on the other side of that too, I think being the recipient of that information on a brand has been such a game changer for us. I mean, we kicked off this with a focus group. We sent out an email to try to get as many people that were willing to give us information and to help us do it. And I think if we hadn't done that and hadn't taken the time and continuously check in, like, again, any person that walks into that building, I'm like, hey, talk to me, like, what do you think? Try that, if you're willing to, it's just been such a wealth of knowledge. And it's testing as assumptions. Like you said, one of you said earlier, it's like, don't assume what I like and what you think is going to look good on my body. And I think that's really important, because that's what we heard from the first things I remember from the focus group was, I've been told my whole life that I need to blend in. I need to wear black. I can only wear black. I can't wear color. And and this woman was in her 50s and she has carried that with her whole life. And she's like, and I'm over it now. I'm not doing that anymore. And it was just such a eye-opening thing, because I've heard that, black is slimming. Well, why are we trying to slim? So I think hearing that, like, that feedback from your customers and from partners has been so valuable to me. And I think that any brand that's going to start extending their sizing needs to take the time to do that for sure.
Just to add on that, fat people aren't a monolith. We all don't want to wear the same thing. We all don't want to look the exact same. What I feel comfortable, beautiful, and kick ass in might be someone's exact nightmare outfit. And again, I really think it comes back to this bias of fat people or plus size people must all want one outfit or all want to look the same, right? Instead of being like, just because our body sizes are different doesn't mean we don't have different aesthetics, different things that we're into, different trends that we're willing to try. And so to just constantly be checking your own internal process as a brand or as, a social media marketer or as a writer, am I picking this because this is my assumption of what a plus size person should look like? Or am I giving people the opportunity to define how they want the world to see them? Because I think that so much confidence, for me at least, has come from being able to dress in a way that aligns with how I see myself. And I think that that is an opportunity I want everyone to have. And in order for that to exist, there has to be diversity in what is being designed, what is being offered. And I think such a great opportunity for ethical and sustainable fashion brands to be snagging that market, because I do think fast fashion in a lot of ways is still falling short on that.
Well, this has been such a wonderful conversation to put words to so many of the challenges in the industry right now. And I think it's been such a wealth of diverse experiences and viewpoints within the industry as well. So I so appreciate the three of you being here today. And I would just like to thank you for your time. So thank you so much. Is there anything else that you're like, if you get nothing else from this conversation, I want you to leave with this that we have not yet hit on?
I think for me, the only thing is I had the opportunity to speak at the Sustainable Fashion Forum years ago, and I am so excited by how much progress I've seen in ethical and sustainable fashion lines and what they offer for the plus size community. And much like inclusive sizing, I feel like we're not there yet. There is still more work to be done, especially looking at grading above that 3X. I always want to make sure I mention that, because above a 3X is a cliff, and it is a huge cliff in size availability, especially in ethical and sustainable fashion. Abel, I know you've committed to go up to a 5X by 2023. And I know that when you had us there, we pushed hard for that. And I always want to push hard for that in these opportunities where I know brands are watching. And if you're a plus size person, I hope that you feel more seen in ethical and sustainable fashion. And I hope that you know that there is still more work to be done. And I don't think anyone on this panel is saying like, check, inclusive sizing is done, we're out, we've nailed it, that there is always that push for it.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, I think, is in regards to brands, take the time to, like Marielle said, like plus size people aren't a monolith. And I personally, I grew up in Miami. I grew up in sundresses. My mom hated it, but what I wore was very revealing sometimes. I liked fun, short things. I like looking my age because I'm 23 and I want to like live like that, like my other friends that are wearing the cute trendy stuff right now as well. And so I think when we're creating plus size clothes, think of all plus size people. Like unless like your brand specifically is for a specific age group, which is totally fine. Like I would go with my mom to Lane Bryant. I wasn't buying things at Lane Bryant with my mom because my mom was like, this is cute, but that's because it was for her. But I think if you're open to having a large group of people buying your clothes, taking into consideration what like a 20-year-old plus size person would want to wear, as well as someone that's like 45 that's plus size. I think there's a way to have both and, you know, make it fun.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, ladies. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for the great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.